Switzerland is often seen as one of the world's most innovative countries, but China is also making a name for itself as a tech powerhouse. You will find out why in our first special monthly program in association with swissnex. I caught up with Felix Moesner, CEO of swissnex China, at the recent summer Davos in Tianjin. He told me that while China may be ahead in speed, Switzerland still takes the crown for quality. He also gives advice to Swiss companies to protect their intellectual property when operating in the Chinese market. swissnex China started 10 years ago, and you've been at the head for about a year now. But in terms of your experience, you've been in Asia for about 16 years now. So you've really had the time to see how China's innovation landscape has changed. What has been the biggest takeaway from the past decade?
Well, you're absolutely correct. So it's around 16 years I have passed in Japan. And for me, it's the first time to come here after my time in Boston. So I just moved over from Boston to China. And when looking back actually to what's happening, you see actually this drive. The people here, not only in Shanghai where swissnex is based, swissnex China, but all over China, you see the drive, how the people are hungry in sense for innovation, and that's actually the field where we work in. So the field of innovation, you see the many changes, even within the 1 year. It's really incredible how much has been accomplished. But when looking back to the past 10 years, I would say we started here more on the university side to connect the universities. On one hand, we also saw immediately potential to work on science and technology cooperation because there was a lot of activity going on. But I'm most impressed of the development, for example, how much there's invested in R&D.
Can you be a little bit more specific? You're actually on home ground, you have inside knowledge. Can you give me some concrete examples of innovation that has really blown your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few. For example, you have on one hand, you have the trains, the high-speed trains. I mean, they haven't existed 10 years ago. And it's the dedication how to put innovation to work and to have really clear examples. And I would definitely say the trains, so the network of the trains, which is connecting the people in China, this is one of the ways.
Would you ever go back to riding an SBB train, or does it not stack up?
Well, that's a very interesting comparison because as you look, I mean, Switzerland is compared to China is a small country. So I think there the SBB does a wonderful, great job, and here you have different dimensions, and I think it has to be done in a different way. And obviously, having a train in Switzerland with 350 or even a faster speed, 350 kilometers per hour. I mean, it's feasible, but you cannot have it for short distances. You need long distances.
Speaking of this comparison between Switzerland and China, let's look at the process from innovation, development to the final product. How does innovation work in China compared to Switzerland?
Well, I think the keyword is rapid prototyping. So that means really to come with an idea. Best ways, for example, Shenzhen. When you go to Shenzhen, you have these hacker spaces, you have these little shops. You come with an idea, you explain what you would like to have, and they really try to put it together. It's not only hardware, but also on the software side. And for example, we also use this fast prototyping, this drive also to train our students from Switzerland. So we bring delegations to China, to Shenzhen, and teach them actually how to do this fast prototyping to bring one idea into a product and production in 1 month. And so this is incredible.
It sounds like this process of conception, as you mentioned, is quite rapid. Do we feel that in China they really skip out so many of the middle steps? That's how they can reach this fast prototyping?
I would not say that they skip it. I think when you look from the government, you have plans like the Made in China 2025, where it's a rock solid build up of the innovation. But of course, I mean, they want to do it fast. I mean, that's a speed in China. But when you see from the past 10 years, how much was invested in R&D. And that's a very important indicator when you look in China to build up a solid innovation. So 10 years ago it was between Germany and Japan. Then in the year 2014, the R&D amount of Europe was surpassed, and this year they will reach the same amount of the United States.
Does Switzerland need to play a catch-up game with China in terms of pace and speed of innovation?
That's a very interesting question. I think what we play with words here, we call it China speed and Swiss quality. And usually quality is not always associated with speed. And I think the catch-up is, in Switzerland we already have a pretty high level of innovation. So what I see more is that it's very complementary. So if we would see actually many ways how to smoothly collaborate with a future China on maybe I would say even on the quality level and on the speed level.
It sounds like you're trying to balance both sides out by emphasizing Swiss quality, but we are still on the slower pace then.
Well, Switzerland is not on the very. I would say we have our processes and they work perfectly for Switzerland, and China has their own processes. And so what we try to match, and so I think we bring the good elements of Switzerland together with the good elements of China, so connect the two worlds. So I can give you an example. So we had a drone event, and originally we were thinking, should we call it Homes of Drones? And we were thinking, what actually is the strength of drones in China? And we realized actually it's a home by itself. So because 70-80% of the drones are built in China, whereas in Switzerland we have the niche. We are extremely strong in the niche, for example, like for inspection drones, or where you can fly in very dangerous areas and so on. And so we brought the two worlds together and we tried to enrich both sides.
Well, Switzerland and China might be ahead in drones, but just taking a look at China, they still haven't built a ship of their own yet. How can you explain that?
It's partially true, but you see a big push these days. But partially true, I would say, around Shanghai, you have a dedicated zone where you have manufacturing for IC chips for semiconductors. So this is existing. But these days you have to ensure that actually that your supply chain is not interrupted. And this happened recently. And so this is also one of the reasons why China is extremely motivated now to build up their own capacity in chip manufacturing. And you will see this also from the big companies. So I visited Alibaba, and there was a very clear signal that Alibaba also wants to build up certain chip production capabilities, for example. So I mean, this is strategic for China to be able to have the supply chain.
Is artificial intelligence also going to be a hot area where China will be facing more global competition down the track?
I think it's one of the areas where China has a very good basis, because when you talk about artificial intelligence, it has to do with data. A lot of data, so big data. And China's regulations are different from other countries, so it's possible to have here access to a lot of data, whereas sometimes it's a little more difficult.
And that is very interesting, because from Western countries' side, privacy is a huge topic. And then if China doesn't face this issue, with more data, they can create more intelligent products and actually have a very competitive advantage.
That's correct. Let's take one example. So it's called SenseTime, which is a startup. It has been founded in the year 2014. It's evaluated now at the level of 4.5 billion US dollars. So within 4 years, and their product actually is facial recognition. So basically, when people come down the escalator, that they instantly recognize the people, and obviously also the government is a big customer, but they also have subsidiaries in other countries. So this company is really amazing.
But it seems that there's more market acceptance here.
Yes, absolutely. I think the Chinese are very open to new things, so it's readily absorbed. They are very curious, look at it, and so we have to see how it will come in the future. For example, this facial recognition or all the other AI services, because at the end it's convenience.
And taking a look at also another new technology, which is blockchain, it seems that China hasn't really caught up with that yet. Do you feel that the hesitancy towards blockchain technology comes down to the fact that it isn't controlled by a single entity, rather than by multiple players?
Well, blockchain is like everywhere in the world. It's really a hot topic, and there's no difference in China. It's a hot topic. There's only one exception, is when it's linked with financial services. So there are a few limitations, but there are many areas where blockchain is deployed. So for example, also Alibaba and big logistics companies are using blockchain to actually have their products marked and see. For example, we also have a Swiss startup. It's called ScanTrust, and they use QR codes to have an answer to counterfeiting, for example, counterfeiting of wine. And so they have the barcode on it, and they also work on a way to use blockchain in that as well. So, but it's a Swiss startup in Shanghai.
So it seems that there are companies making inroads in this area in China. Now, since we are at the World Economic Forum event in Tianjin, today we did hear a speech from Chinese Premier Minister Li Keqiang. And very interestingly enough, he also raised the issue of intellectual property theft. Now, do you think that this currently is a big issue?
Well, I'm really glad that he mentioned this, so next to pushing innovation.
I know, right after trade tensions, which is also a hot topic.
Absolutely. So I think the IP must be taken serious, because Prime Minister Li is also looking at investment or more investment into China. And so even if this question is not solved in a proper way, for example, we have now our 10 startups of the best startups here at the World Economic Forum, and there we have to make sure that also some of the startups are treated properly in China in terms of the IP rights, so that the IP will not pose any issues.
Not only him, but 2 US congressmen also paid a visit, and they actually called it quite unfair that when coming to China and bringing up these cases of intellectual property theft, that progress always stops at the courts. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm not the expert in IP, I have to say, but...
Can you give us some potential workarounds and solutions?
I can give you one solution of a startup that we have here. It's a startup with 16 patents, and the startup itself is only 6 years old, and I think it already has a certain strength in this sense, how to be able to defend itself. But again, I mean, looking at the startup case, the startups which we bring here to China, they are really of high quality, so it's high tech, and we call it deep tech. So that means it's a level that is very hard to copy. And so that's one of the strategies, for example. And the other one is speed. And maybe one is if you would also have a Chinese partner when you set up operations in China, so that you learn actually how to deal with certain issues that may come up in advance.
So to sum up, your advice would actually be for a Swiss company to go more complex, so that the idea is harder to replicate.
Complex and speed.
Now, just to wrap up, what would be your 2 or 3 key advices that you would give to potential companies who want to try to break into the Chinese market?
Well, I'm not so much on the business side, but I have to say, when looking at innovation...
Cultural advice as well.
Cultural advice. It's very important to understand first how the Chinese and how the landscape works, because we do have certain understanding, especially when I moved to Boston, how the Americans work. But it's unfortunately China is a little bit too far away, so I think it's very important to first build up the understanding of the business culture and also basics on China. But I think that's a common sense. But on the other hand, it's also super important to know that things are being done very fast in China, and not to be surprised about the speed. Because if we are able at the end to bring together the Swiss quality and the China speed, I think we have a perfect product.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moesner.
Thank you very much also for the opportunity. Thank you.